when we're looking at possession and pregnancy, we could see the footsteps where the phenomenon evolved. Its pathology mutated. And in a way, maybe this was on our part or the phenomenon intentionally did this, but we started to kind of compartmentalize these case studies, right? Possession's possession, the missing fetus syndrome is something completely different. So in this, you see, it's almost like creating its own mythology within the world. And so it was like almost like in the Levant, it was possession. And then throughout history, you can see how these beings learned. It's almost like, again, that they evolved too. And in their evolution, they realized, okay, that they can actually create biological avatars. They can actually inseminate women with fetuses. And in order to create a body that looks like the ghost god, they've actually created their own gods to inhabit.
Hello and welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore folklore, magic, the world of the spirits, and everything in between. Today we're joined by longtime guest Nathaniel Gillis to explore his fascinating work and groundbreaking theories on paranormal phenomena. Nathaniel introduces us to the concept of Necronetics, a framework that connects possession, pregnancy, and otherworldly encounters as processes that replicate life forms. Now, this one goes deep. We get into the evolution of a certain type of being, which Nathaniel has christened the Molters, and we get into how they manifest in archetypical forms that mirror humanity's collective consciousness. It's a deep one. It's a deep one, so you're going to have to put your listening ears on for this one. Now, unfortunately, the first 15 minutes of this show were lost to the streaming gods, so we join kind of mid-conversation, but there's a good hour and a half of just fantastic stuff from Nathaniel here, so I think you're going to really enjoy this one. Now, the conversation takes us into deep, as I said, sometimes unsettling territory, touching on the nature of gods, religion, and the way these ideas shape our understanding of spiritual and supernatural encounters. Nathaniel shares some of the challenges he's faced during his research, from the potential dangers of diving too deep into the mysteries to deciding how and when he should share his findings with the world. We also draw intriguing connections between his work and Whitley Schreiber's studies on the interactions with the dead, exploring what these encounters might reveal about unconsciousness and the unseen. So Nathaniel gives us a glimpse into his upcoming book, The Skin That Crawls, which will serve as an introduction into Necronetics and lay the groundwork for further exploration of his theories. And in the Plus show, we get deeper still into these topics, really delving into the dark corners of this subject matter. And Nathaniel shares some truly frightening stories to support his truly frightening theory. So I think this is a really strong Spirit Box show. Now, I would say this might be the last time we have Nathaniel on the Spirit Box, as he's really considering his position and as a researcher in this field because of how dark it has become, because it's become so intense, and the phenomenon he believes has been pushing back on him. Now, if you want to hear the Plus show, very simple to do so. Just click the Linktree links below in the show notes and come and join the Patreon and get the full version of the show. Equally, if you want to support my work, you can pick up a copy of my book, Song of the Dark Man. It's always appreciated to know that people out there are reading my words. Okay, that's it from me. Let's get on with the show.
But also within the Vatican cases. I mean, when we have exorcists that are trying to interrogate the entity says, listen, I don't understand that. Give me another language. Or with respect to exorcisms, is fascinating too, especially in Baghdad, where it was one case was a Jewish individual possessed by a Muslim. And so they had a Jewish rabbi trying to exorcise the ghost god. And the ghost god said, I don't even believe in that. So they had to go get someone else in the town over.
Okay. Yeah.
In the doctrine, again, if they're all horns and hooves, right? doesn't
Yeah.
really make sense. The doctrine had to align with the life history of that entity.
Yeah.
And so my point here is that there is a species of the ghost god present. And I think, and I can prove that in the incubi cases, even some of the UFO abduction phenomena, they've been hiding behind it all. And that goes back to my book cover, where you have a practitioner, right, holding the mask of a devil.
This is a really interesting perspective, because when we kind of look at like some of the constant overlap between the various different types of beings or entities that bump up against humanity over the years, there's consistency in some particular areas that I think marry up quite succinctly to what you're proposing. And one of the things that initially is that you have this like consistency with people who have had fairy abductions, and they see the dead there in where they go. So in fairyland, there's fairies, but there's also the dead, right? The similar things have happened within alien abductions, and excuse me, and the jinn specifically, from Islamic sheiks within, who deal specifically with possession, talk about some are Islamic jinn, some are Christian jinn, some are pagan jinn, some don't believe in Allah at all. That relates exactly to what you're describing of like, well, that doesn't work on me because I don't believe in it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a data point that cannot be ignored. I mean, people will ignore it, especially that want to prop up the Catholic perspective. But when you look at the data set, it's demonstrative.
Yeah,
it has something to say about all of this. But again, if we're looking back at what this is, there are data points that have to be researched. I mean, the part of this, again, people think I'm an anomaly, and I am to a certain degree, but it's only because a lot of people in the field, a lot of this, you're not going to sell tickets for this. You're not going to put butts in seats for this. It's unique, and it has a certain darkness to it that it's misunderstood, right? It's not just alien. It's familiar to us, but there's a certain level of transcendence that we're encountering when we research these case studies. It's not that there isn't a there. Whatever that is so foreign to us. And it has access to everything. Everything. It knows when we'll die, knows when others will die. It knows what cars they'll die in car accidents, what clothes they died in. And so this gets back to the idea that at least some of these beings are not extraterrestrial. They're interdimensional. Not interdimensional, interdimensional. We're dealing with something that left a body and is now looking back into the room, into the house that we exist in. But so that's really kind of the body of my work. And then we can, I don't know where else you want to go, but we can now start talking about case studies where pregnancy and possession were present at the same time. And then you start to see that these are practitioners.
Okay.
That something has weaponized them.
So just before we get into that, when can people expect the book to be released? Is it out now?
I'm finishing it up. It's I was going to put all of Necronetics in it, but it was too much. So I'm kind of trimming it down and hopefully kind of create the hypothesis that, right, these aren't lamb. They're not lamb. They aren't horns and hooves. That these are, it's an archetype the phenomenon's leaning into.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. Well, that's something to look forward to. Grand. So you spoke to some case studies there.
Yeah. So when we're looking at possession and pregnancy, we could see the footsteps where the phenomenon evolved. Its pathology mutated. And in a way, maybe this was on our part or the phenomenon intentionally did this, but we started to kind of compartmentalize these case studies, right? Possession's possession. The missing fetus syndrome is something completely different. So in this, you see, it's almost like creating its own mythology within the world. And so it was like almost like in the Levant, it was possession, possession, possession. And then throughout history, you can see how these beings learned. It's almost like, again, that they evolved too. And in their evolution, they realized, okay, that they could actually create biological avatars. They can actually inseminate women with fetuses. And in order to create a body that looks like the ghost god, they've actually created their own gods to inhabit. Now, the first mention of this is fascinating. It's in the Levant, and there were practitioners. They were the first hybrid mothers. They were called the Mahalat. It's a Hebrew word, but they were mistresses of the images of the dead.
Oh, wow.
Yes, they have a specific and unique ability. These were specifically necromancers. And the phenomenon would often groom and curate their consciousness. Kings would go to them. Entire kingdoms would almost bow down to their powers because they had an ability to see the phenomenon. They had ability to communicate with these entities. And so, matter of fact, for those who are interested, behind me there's a book by Professor Esther Amori from the Union Theological Seminary, and she outlines many of these women throughout history. One of them is called the Witch of Endor. But the phenomenon was, again, curating and contouring these experiencers to the point that they would be able to describe the ghost, not the body, but the actual ghost gods. And they were actually called, again, the mistresses of the images of the dead. Now, at the same time in history that's occurring, it was occurring in northern Syria. The phenomenon was incarnating to different cultures. Does it make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, it was manifesting to different cultures, and then we have the beginning, I guess, the dawning first breaths of altar building. And so in northern Syria, where the first altars were built, now you have them literally in the deserts, positioning their families underneath the auspices of whatever this intelligence was. So the phenomenon was quite literally manifesting to experiencers and then creating practitioners at the very same time. It's fascinating. My point, though, is that somewhere in history, at least in that specific time, there were people, specifically women, that were being approached in the nighttime hours by entities that were, and here are the ingredients, inducing them into dreamlike states, hovering over their bodies, and I've had cases like that myself, hovering over their bodies, staring into their eyes, and then the woman will wake up and think it was just a dream. So that's one key data point. A dreamlike state induced into a dreamlike state by an entity. So in demonology, we called that a dream demon, right? We didn't know what to do with it. We just thought that was the best term. And so, early demonologists like Bernard of Gordon, even Montague Summers and Sinister Avamino, that there's a dream demon. It's a demon that appears to the specifically females in a dream state. And then again, it wasn't just that, but it started to evolve as well to where now these same women are coming forward with cases of being assaulted by something that induced them into the dreamlike state.
Yeah.
Two data sets, 2 data points. And then these same people are now coming, this happened even in the 16th century, the debug phenomenon. We've talked about that in times past, where now it's not just the dreamlike state, it's not just an incubus. Now it's possessing them. So now this is specifically in Safdi Israel in the 16th century, where now they're going through all of the stages, and there's another evolution in that there was an invading consciousness present within them with its own language preference, its own history, its own origin story. And so now exorcists are conversing with them and saying, okay, like, who are you? Tell me your story. Some of these people have been murdered and they were solving their own murder cases. Here's my killer. It's fascinating stuff. My point here, though, is that there are certain data points that you see overlapping. They're cross-cultural, interreligious. And then Father Sinistrari starts a conversation. And he says, look, all of the above has taken place with a specific woman. But now we're discovering sigils, pictorial signatures of entities carved into their skin. Same time, they're being hovered over, assaulted, and groomed. And when I looked at that, my friend, and I looked at all the ingredients, as I said, there's a problem here, because at first blush, I thought they were just symbols. So I started having case studies of my own like that. I had one case study about 2 hours from here where the entity didn't even bother putting this woman to sleep. She's consciously paralyzed in her bed. And the husband tells me, Nathaniel, she can't move. She can only talk. Her only words are, it's hovering right over me, and it's this close to my eyes. So what is my point? My point is that they're doing the same things today they've always been doing. And that I even have a text from the Apocrypha of John that goes through in detail everything they were doing in antiquity, to the point where they were hovering over the female, staring into her eyes, and then pulling off the mask. And now she's literally looking into the eyes of an entity, the ghost god. Now, I can go down in that direction, but my point here are these are key data sets. They're key data points that are leading us to a certain ritual over and over again. And because demonology has been dominated by the Vatican and by the decompartmentalization of possession, they missed the mark. And I think, again, that's the work of Necronetics, trying to get us to have a larger, deeper conversation as to what's actually occurring here.
Right.
So the sigils, again, in order to understand what they are, again, that's the pictorial signatures designed to quite literally conjure, one could even say, the presence or even the consciousness of another entity. And so demonology always separated them, right? The demonology says that, okay, these sigils, if a practitioner carves a sigil, it's designed to contact and conjure a demon. And that's where it failed. Because if these were demons, there would be somebody else conjuring them. They wouldn't be conjuring themselves into a body, would they? So I realized very, very early on that demonology, at least the construct of demonology, falls apart in light of these case studies. There's a reason for it, right? Again, religion tried to dominate the subject matter, and because of that, it did profound and irreparable damage. My point, though, again, is that these sigils were tied to an entity. And at the end of the day, there were cases, and this is fascinating, specifically in the Levant, in the Debug phenomenon, where the women are possessed by consciousness and they were pregnant by the entity from the dream. So possession and pregnancy are the same to them.
Right.
And so at certain times, it's fascinating too, when the phenomenon took the consciousness out of the woman, it also plucked the child as well. And my necronetics is suggesting that that is the missing fetus syndrome.
Right.
Essentially. And I know I like to ramble, brother, so I don't want to keep going.
No,
So
you keep rambling. This is fascinating. It's extraordinary. It really is. And again, it's just like it strikes against, like, straight across so many different, like, unexplained or areas of exploration within the kind of, the paranormal or even in the occult world. It really does. There's a couple of avenues that I do want to talk to you about this, but I don't think it's for a recording. I think we just have
That's
to have a
fine.
separate chat on it. But in terms of like we have the similar thing with similar idea with alien hybridism
Hmm.
and kind of the removal of fetuses mid or late
Hmm.
term. Um, you have almost the reverse of that with the idea of fairies and changelings and taking of children
Yep.
and replacing them with a kind of a wizened fairy.
Hmm.
And in Jin lore, you have the idea of a certainly sexual interest in human beings, and
Yes.
and love for human beings, jealousy for human beings, that kind of thing. Like, um,
Hmm.
these are all kind of like they're all adjacent to what you've described, um, and I, I I find that extraordinary. And equally, if you go back into the mythologies, kind of one of the parts of kind of like my thesis in my book was within mythology, we have kind of overt discussions and
Hmm.
references to human and fairy couplings and creating offspring. You know, um,
Hmm.
this comes up again and again. Like, like
What is that?
what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like seems to be everywhere. You get into these areas everywhere. And like fairies and Jin. Like we really have to park the whole Disneyfication of these. Like,
Yeah.
David
Right.
Halpin, the Irish researcher, he describes fairies as being like these are like Cenobites from Hellraiser. Like these, they're not,
Yeah.
they're not these wonderful, kind of beings of light. Like they went not in their entirety for sure. You know.
Right.
Um,
I agree.
so why do we have all these kind of similar cross references?
Well, I think that let me back up and say this, and then I'll get into the archetypal presence within our species. We're looking at the purpose of blending a species within another. I don't
Okay.
think that's what's happening. I don't personally buy into the modern interpretation of hybridism. When I lectured at the Awakening in February, my lecture was called The Motors, the
Mm-hmm.
hybrid, the host, and the copy.
Mm-hmm.
Modern hybridism teaches us that the hybrid mother is the host of the entity. That's what they say. Oh, she's the host. It's a parasite. She's the host. It's not true. The fetus is the host.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And even in the Apocrypha of John, it gives us a very detailed pathology. It's a systematic pathology, the ritualistic nature we're talking about here. One of which was the idea that they appeared in the image of the husband. I've had cases like that in India where it's the boyfriend and
Mm-hmm.
they induce them in the dreamlike state, right? Remove their ability to say no and increase their desire to say yes. And at the moment of conception, they pull the mask of the husband off. And like I said before, they're staring directly into the eyes of whatever consciousness, whatever that entity is. Their perception is fascinating. I think it's worth noting. They believed that the purpose of staring into the eyes, which again, I've seen this right now in modernity, was that there was some kind of ritualistic belief that whatever man or whatever image the woman is staring into at the moment of insemination, that she will be impregnated with that material image.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we have an apparition of the ghost god trying to literally tailor a more solid state of its existence. So forget about James Frazier, I'm leaving my body, placing it into somebody else. It's now I'm recreating my own body in order to place myself into. And so, with that said, now we're going into this archetypal presence, and that is the husband.
Mhm.
That's not a bug, that's a feature. And these archetypes that the phenomenon incarnates as, they're everywhere. And what fascinates me is that, again, this is why we have to nurture our ability to test the spirits, because that is the most profound and efficient way they have navigated around our ability to see through the archetype. I've witnessed this in demonology, right? Everybody's like Ed Lorraine Warren, okay, but what did they really witness? I'm not poo-pooing them or anything, but I'm trying to kind of draw out a highlight of the phenomenon that people are just kind of skipping over. And that is that when people see demons, they often see horns and hooves, and yet there is no demon in the Bible ever described having those attributes.
Mhm.
So why are Catholic demons seeing them? There's one mention in the book of Revelation about a dragon with horns, but we're not witnessing that in the field, are we?
Nope.
Why? Because it's leaning into the illiteracy of our species as archetypes. And so, as long as we think it's horns and hooves, we'll never actually decipher and see into the proto intelligence wearing the mask. This is why it's the Fae,
Mhm.
or this is why it's the dream demon. It's never a dream demon. These are characteristics, but these are archetypes too. And so what starts to happen is it's like the Philip experiment, where these psychics and parapsychologists literally designed a ghost. They designed an archetype, my friend, just like the horns and hoofs.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, something incarnated as that. And so within this dynamic of that which is being witnessed and the witness, the experiencer and the phenomenon, there is a form of topomancy occurring where the phenomenon has to be seen by you in order to allow you to construct the archetype it wants to inhabit. I'll go. In other words, when I encountered a succubus, it was on top of me, straddling me in a dream state.
Right.
When I woke up, it was still on top of me. It was in my nightmare
Mhm.
and it was physically on top of me. But when I saw it, it had constructed its archetype to look like, at the time, my fiance laying next to me.
Right.
So there is a form of topomancy in the sense that it's not a thought form,
Mhm.
it's manifesting to and manifesting through. I'm independent of your consciousness,
Mhm.
but there are archetypes within you that you'll allow me to be. And in that way, they have masqueraded throughout our species. This is the only thing, to my mind, that would explain demonologists seeing horns and hooves, ufologists seeing the alien,
Mhm.
right? Irish folklorists, right, seeing something completely different. And I realized that nuance once I started to kind of nail down the husband. That's an archetype.
Right.
It's creating its own mask in front of us. And that mask itself is made of our memories, our dreams.
Mhm.
And so my point here is that yes, there is a symbiotic relationship that it creates.
Mhm.
And this gets back into parapsychology, because one of my mentors, Steve Mera, in me and him and Barry Fitzgerald, we've always been asking, okay, why is it the phenomenon wants to be seen? And so now we have to get into like this kind of philosophical argument. There's a contrast between being visible to us and being seen by us,
Mhm. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
right? And so it's here, but it's not. It's present with, but absent from. And so my point here, again, this is why I've collapsed all constructs. What's present with us is the mask.
Mhm.
What's absent from us is that proto intelligence. That's why it's like, okay, look at the behavioral patterns. Forget about all the archetypes. This may be the connection between all of it. This may be why the missing fetus syndrome is in demonology and in ufology. It's because these are merely archetypes that we're using, and the phenomenon is weaponizing
Right.
just to kind of hide in our midst.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's
Yeah, it's a, yeah, it's really really interesting, Nate. And as I said, I admire your thinking and kind of interrogation into this area. Um, I mean, it's deeply worrying, when you
Yeah.
get into it, because essentially, like, at no level are we being anything else than essentially cattle. Like from
Oh,
well,
brother.
yeah.
Let me throw this at you real quick. This is a heavy one. There are certain grimoires that require certain secretions, and they're the same secretions that are being harvested in the UFO abduction phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Why? One of the demonologists, he's actually a vampirologist, Montague Summers, began to triangulate this. What's the purpose? In which era literature, the semen of a recently deceased man specifically hung. Matter of fact, it was tailored down to the point of how they died. How they died determined what the phenomenon needed from them.
Right.
And so the scatology between demonology, ritual magic, and ufology has not changed. The missing fetus syndrome has not changed. Matter of fact, right now, is past October rather, just to put everybody aware, make everybody aware of what ufology is. In Germany, they had a parapsychologist who had a conference. It's a parapsychological conference, and their goal was to have an experience or vacate their own body, prepare themselves as a vessel, so an extraterrestrial can inhabit them. We have Tim Taylor taking Diana Walsh Pasuko out, blindfolded, out to an undisclosed location. Open your eyes. Here's my altar I'm building to them.
Mm-hmm.
So the same archetypal presence that described itself as guides, lovers, orbs,
Mm-hmm.
ghosts, is now almost self-updating into a new presence, and that is the extraterrestrial. This is why I'm trying to kind of back out of the field, because it's wanting the same things.
Yeah.
But this is a new way to evade us and the actual research being done to interrogate it. If they're extraterrestrial, why do they want to be worshipped? Matter of fact, if I could say this, if I don't want to get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in England, I was downstairs from the hotel eating dinner with a couple of researchers that have been, one is a parapsychologist, been in the field for longer than I've been alive. He told me, Nathaniel, he said, we just wrapped up filming a series. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. And he said, we were working with this psychic, and he has a guide. And I said, that's fascinating, right? It's right up my alley. Let's talk, He said, we were on a highway when the guide told us, hey, listen, not the guide. Yeah, basically the guide. The guide says, okay, I want you guys to turn off this dirt road and go into the woods. And he said, as far as we know, the psychic's guide was a deceased person.
Right.
That's the archetype. Okay. And what I'm going to prove to you, and this is something we have to pay attention to in these case studies, there's always an archetype and there's an antitype. There's the archetype, there's the proto-intelligence wearing that mask. In these case studies, I've seen them in demonology, where demonologists go in there thinking it's horns and hoofs.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I told you, right? In the Apocrypha of John, that's the mask. And then before they know it, the phenomenon takes the mask off. I got chills because I know what I'm talking about. And then now you're interfacing with something that's primeval and you have no rules for. This is the same thing that happened to him. This individual told the psychic, I'm a female. I died along with my children in a plane crash a couple towns over. They went to that city, went to City Hall, never existed.
Right.
Archetype.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the woods now, my friend. They have this tree, and I was told that it was tall and it twisted, something like out of a Sleepy Hollow. They're there for 10 minutes. Finally, they're about to wrap it up when the psychic goes, they're here. Who's here? Aliens? Ghosts? What are you talking about? I don't know what they are, but they're here. And he said at that time there was this wind that came over them. And he said there was a presence. From the shadows, multiple voices in unison said, "Bow down before us."
Wow.
Right. All of the evidence suggests the same intelligence that was curating the consciousness of early practitioners in northern Syria. Build me an altar.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you whatever you want. It's the same thing we're dealing with now. In whatever that is, I think encompasses all of the phenomenon.
Yeah.
And it's singular. But that would be more like a practitioner to me, or something, from my perspective, that felt worthy of being worshipped, that demanded it.
Right.
What are we dealing with, brother? Can you imagine that? I mean, he was crying. It's like I didn't even know what to do.
Yeah.
And then the voices kept trying to tell them, "Come with us, but bow down to us first."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super intense. Yeah. That's one way of putting it. It's fucking terrifying. It's the other. And
But that would be, again, this, and this is why I'm so fascinated by the Rephaim and the Elohim.
mm-hmm.
Even the Rephaim, again, what happened within Hebrew mythology is they try to reincorporate older traditions.
Right.
So, in the Ugaritic rituals, we have the Rephaimi. Who were they? Those are the ghost gods. Apparitional consciousness. And then what happened was this, they had this way of explaining it too, where that's why when they had a new body, they had the ability to project. And so there was this kind of dualistic nature to them.
Okay.
Where at one point they could be apparitional and then they could possess a body. And this gets back to seances, my friend. How we have cases, even the skull experiment, where you're looking at an apparition building itself from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And again, people are going to say I'm using my opinion too much. Well, okay, the research that I've done suggests that's the ghost god.
Okay.
So it's all interesting stuff, but that story particularly disturbed me.
Mm. No, I can imagine. Yeah. If this, if our source point is some kind of practitioner, doing something that they become more than human, different to human, or develop another evolutionary path from a human being. Was there a non-human instruction?
There we go.
To help them learn that. So much magic is received. Is taught by entities.
Let me put it to you this way, and this is why in my book cover there's a separate person, right? Something else, also wearing the mask of the demonic behind him, teaching him. That's in my book cover, by the way. But that's why I'm saying, like, it was tailored specifically for my hypothesis. Yes. I call them molters because their apparitions look like the bodies they used to inhabit, and that's what they're replicating even now. But it's probable, my friend, again, that what they're doing is almost, it's not just biological avatars, but it's almost the distribution of a single brain, where one consciousness in multiple bodies. Even in the Rendlesham Forest, we have that where, and I'm going to get to a point, by the way. I hope my ADHD is killing me today, brother, because it's always fun to talk to you. I'm like, what do I say? But yeah, where you had copies of bodies, as mentioned in the Apocryphon of John, they all looked alike, and they had a singular brain. We're thinking of drones, right? They were actual biological avatars, and one witness in the Rendlesham Forest incident said that when one looked up, they all looked up. So something had possessed them. And even in Lou Elizondo's book, Imminent, he talks about some of the biological avatars our government is in possession of. And he made a point, this is fascinating. He said that, and let's just take his word for it, and that just, I guess, for a moment. But he said that that upon examination, that their brains were too smooth.
Whoa.
It's going to blow your mind, brother, that they themselves lacked the intellectual ability to design the craft they were piloting. So something had been piloting them.
Mm.
Consciousness, something had created a biological avatar to step into. And this again, I think, leads back to the nature of possession and why we cannot afford to let religious institutions define that phenomenon.
Right.
They don't have that authority. And I'm not saying I do. What I'm saying is give it to the people, like give it to the researchers, because what they've done to us thus far is not just further the compartmentalization of it, but it led us astray. It pointed to some kind of, again, these are fallen angels and everything, and in doing that, it has done damage. But my point here is it would be the next stage of necronetics would not simply be the dispossessing of my body on the battlefield and possessing something else. It would be creating a biological avatar to inhabit, where the apparition slides into the mold it created.
Mm-hmm.
And now it re-inhabits our world. It incarnates again. It's more than that. Now I could create multiple bodies of one consciousness. So now you have the distribution of a singular intelligence that at any point you kill one, that's fine. You can't figure out which one I'm in. And I'm just what they call it, they call midrashing in Jewish mythology. But that's what we're essentially could be what we're dealing with. And it's quite probable that even to this point, what we're looking at is a species that is trying to self-replicate itself. I'm replicating through these bodies. But it would be almost not an artificial intelligence, real consciousness, but a biological avatar that can die at will.
Right.
I can dispossess it. It's gone. I'm in something else. And what's so fascinating about this, too, my friend, is that's where the research is leading us, not just in demonology, then ufology, where they're suggesting, look, matter of fact, I'll say this and I'll shut up. Matter of fact, Nick Pope, and I asked one of my mentors in UK about this.
Yeah.
Nick Pope was on a podcast with Whitley Strieber. And he told Whitley something, and I listen to all kinds of stuff. It's like kind of like my passion in my job. So I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I thought I had heard it all, but Nick Pope says no. He goes, the bodies we're in possession of have interdimensional qualities. I'll hop on the laptop and I email my mentor. He's worked for NATO, British Ministry of Defense. I'm like, hey, what do you think about this? Yep. What does interdimensional mean? Is that apparitional? Are we talking about bodies that can literally be inhabited and alive at one point and deceased the next? Let's take it a step further. If that's a biological avatar for someone else's consciousness, what are we?
Yeah.
So, anyways, to kind of bring all of this home and get rid of my ADHD, it does appear that there are data points that once you start to research them, it's almost irrefutable. We're realizing that there has been a transfer of technology to practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
We have atheists and agnostics who have literally bypassed the scientific method, not because they don't love science.
Yeah.
Because the phenomenon wants something different from them.
Okay. One of the areas that kind of comes to mind when you're describing this, like the self-replication or the kind of this singular consciousness again shared by multiple avatars. And this might be kind of like a facetious observation, but if we look at kind of like some of the avant-garde, tech bros who are like pursuing prolonging youth and putting off aging for as long as possible. They're kind of in that area. You know,
Oh,
like
absolutely.
when you go to the kind of the extreme element of it, where essentially we have a direct neural interface
Mhm.
with digital technology, where we can kind of ultimately be able to the goal would be to download one's consciousness
Yes.
and put it into
Different
another.
terminology, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yes,
yeah,
my friend.
yeah. Except it's the technology has changed. It's different. You know,
Yeah,
we're now at an evolutionary stage where we can create the material technology to facilitate this uh, in a different way.
hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
It's quite probable that whatever they are tried that,
Hmm.
you know, and it didn't work out, and so that they realized, again, within the duality of technology and necromancy, technology may have failed, I don't know. But
Yeah.
whatever this is, again, it is leaning on, I mean, some of the sigils that I've found on skin, this is why, again, demonology has to be reimagined.
Right.
They were cross-culture and religious. They held to no real religious creed.
Hmm.
It was almost as if religion to us was just kind of math to them, and all of our symbols that we think belong to our species didn't. They were theirs. We may have witnessed them in a ritual, we just didn't really have full context. And
Hmm.
I'll go a step further. They never allowed us to have the full context.
Okay.
And I think that's really what it is. Whatever this is, I think that the skin samples and the subdermal scarifications, I think that they are left sometimes on accident or in a hurry, or and some of them have even disappeared, where they're subdermal, the skin, they're gone. But it's almost as if, again, that they're not just practitioners, but that they're a mystery school that our species is completely ignorant of, and that
Mm.
we aren't even supposed to know exists. And so they go out of their way. I'll give you a case study, Dr. Carla Turner's own case study, where it wasn't just UFOs showing up, it wasn't just aliens, but now it's shadow figures. Now she's in a full-blown malevolent haunting. There's
Mm.
paranormal manifestation. And her this is fascinating. Her son was being abducted, and to her utter astonishment, she gets a phone call from him. He's really worked up. Mom, we got to talk. Why? What's going on? Whatever's taking you is now taking me. And so she gets a hold of his biological father because Carla and him were divorced. They have a family meeting. They're going to hash it all, right? I'm going to explain everything that's going on with me, and our son's going to explain what's going on with him. In the middle of the conversation, my friend, her ex husband looks at Dr. Turner and says, Carla, don't you remember when they gave you a baby, you were pregnant? Now, I need everybody to pay attention to this. She, at that point, was an abduction researcher. It was her job. And again, this is nothing against Dr. Turner, but she had lost the baby. Somewhere the consciousness could not merge with the avatar. Conscious left, and it was just the avatar. What do I
Hmm.
do with the avatar? She not only did something with the child, the phenomenon blocked that part of her memory. She
Wow.
literally did not have it in her mind. So the phenomenon has this ability. Again, we're not supposed to even know about this. This is why I think a lot of what I'm doing is dangerous. We're not supposed to know about this. Practitioners, again, even demonologists, you're in one religious creed, you're in one tradition. The sigils that we're finding on skin transcend all of that, my friend. It's akin to an alien mask, something that was almost like we saw it for a fleeting moment, in that even though we laid eyes on it, we lacked the historical context to know what it was. And there's a reason for that. But yeah, these archetypes, I think they inhabit archetypes in that there are certain people that when they start poking around, my biggest fear, and I'll finish this in a second, but my biggest fear, my friend, is that I start poking around even deeper, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I wake up in the middle of the night and one of these things are there. I'm
Hmm.
like, hey, let's talk. I don't
Hmm.
want to have that conversation.
I don't blame you. And thank you for taking us through your thoughts and your work this evening. It's been really, really interesting, as it always is, Nate. You know, I love your
Yeah,
stuff. You know, so
thank you, brother.
I always
Likewise.
learn
Thank you
something.
for
Always
Yeah,
means to talk to you. You know.
I don't know what this is going to be. I've been told by people in the field that Necronetics is it's going to be hated, but there's a possibility. I'm not saying this because it's me.
Yeah.
It could be groundbreaking. Man. It could be groundbreaking for the field, and I hope it is. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And if anybody wants to find out more about you, about your work, what's the best way for them to do so?
So you can go to my LinkedIn under Nathaniel Gillis if you want to follow the evolution of my research and my hypothesis. Go to my YouTube channel and my playlist. You can filter it from the oldest to newest and kind of see how I evolved. Other than that, I'm on Instagram under my same name, Nathaniel Gillis, and that's how you can follow me. That's how you can contact me, and that's my hypothesis.
Fantastic. Thanks for being on the Spirit Box, man. Good to have you.
Thanks, brother. Thank you for having me.
Let me pause. Quite an intense show, classic, I think, in my opinion. So really, really deep stuff and a lot to get our head around there. So I hope you guys enjoyed that and took something from it. If you want to follow Nathaniel's work, then check out his links below. His link to his YouTube and link to his Instagram. You can find them in the show notes. Equally, if you want to support this show, then do come and join the Patreon or pick up a copy of my book. Thank you. Thanks for listening. I'm Darren Mason. You've been listening to Spirit Box. Take care. Goodbye.